folks. I can see that you're all good timing. You're all joining us now. Welcome to the second day of our winter symposium here at the Film Education Journal. My name's Robert Monroe. I'm one of the editors of the journal. And today we've got a really fantastic panel on using film in the curriculum for excellence, hosted by Michael Daly, a teacher at Drumchapel High School, with some of his colleagues who he'll get to introduce themselves shortly. The event is live captioned, and if you have questions as the event's going on, please put them in the chat and we'll feed them through to Michael to ask to the round table towards the end. Sessions are all recorded as well. You saw the message at the start there, and Flip, my colleague, will email you out the links after the event is finished. We do have a new edition of the journal published just yesterday, the Film Education Journal. And we actually have a co-authored article with a Scottish teacher, Kerry Abercrombie, in it as well. So I would recommend you check that out. Flip will put some links into the chat for you. But yeah, we've got about an hour, and I will pass you on now to our host, Michael Daly.
Thanks very much, Robert. Welcome everyone to this session as part of the Film Education Journal's Winter Symposium. I'm really excited and honoured to get the chance to host this and chat to a panel of outstanding teachers. They're definitely some of the top film educators in the country, and we're really lucky to have them in our classroom working with Scotland's learners. Our discussion today is going to be about how they are using film in curriculum for excellence. Also, there'll be some questions that I'm going to ask the panel, but it will be really informal chat, and we'll just bounce around film use in the classroom and share success stories. This will last about 30 minutes, and then we'll also have 20 minutes for questions from the audience. So if there's any questions that you have or anything that you want to pick up on or is to expand upon, please just pop it in the chat and we'll get through them in that slot. We're also really easy to find on Twitter if anyone wants to keep the chat going. I think the more people champion film education, the better. And we're always really keen to engage on the subject. So I'm now going to just go around the panel and get them to introduce themselves and kind of share a little bit about their story. So Fraser, could you take us away?
Of course. Ignore my caption. I know it says Kim Johnston. Obviously, I'm Fraser Johnston. I teach media at Mungo's High School in Falkirk. I've been the head of the media for 7, maybe 8 years now. I've been teaching the media from all levels, all the way from S1 up to S6, covering BGE, National 5, National 4 and higher, and of course the new NPA, set for SQA. Yeah, it's been absolutely great. Can't complain. So here we are.
Superb, Louise.
Hi there, I'm Louise Sedgwick. I teach at St Margaret's Academy in Livingston, where I've been for, this is my 16th year. I've been teaching English and media since I started, from a start of my probation. Media kind of more informally, I suppose. If I could have done a PGDE in media teaching, I'd have been right on it. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist, but I've been slowly getting more and more media into our curriculum in the school, and that's my mission, to expand on it always. But I've been teaching film for 15 years. It would be great to have just media on my timetable now, but such is life.
That'd be the dream, full-time media. Jacqueline.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Thompson. I work at John Paul Academy in Glasgow, and Michael, that's hosting the event, and I worked together here for 8 years. We came into the school as probationers, and we started to build media really as soon as we came in, and introduce it in a variety of ways. Michael's now moved on to be the head of faculty at Drumchapel, so it's me running the media ship at John Paul, and now we've got media like Fraser from S1 right up until S6 at all levels. We're working to bring in the NPA next year. And yeah, I have a lot of media on my timetable, but it's always really exciting, and it's really good to see the different things that you can do in the classroom with media. So yeah, that's me.
Perfect. So we've got definitely a lot of experience and stuff. So I'm really kind of keen to tap into that. So the first kind of question, just to ease us into it, that we've all spent the majority, if not all of our careers in the kind of C4E era. Could you reflect on your earliest experiences of teaching film? Because I always find this really interesting. It's so broad, and we've all kind of come into it in different ways. So Fraser, what's your earliest experience of teaching film?
Oh wow, so a good question. First of all, my probation year was teaching English. So pretty much when I taught English at Denny High School, I taught films as the main texts. So I would teach, for example, at the time it was Intermediate 2. I was going way back there. I used, for example, texts like The Dark Knight and The Social Network to help engage pupils, and they really seemed to respond to that. But obviously, then what happened was the job full-time media teacher came up at the dream at St Mungo's High School in Falkirk, and I went for that. So pretty much my whole timetable is media. But just now as well, it's only more recently we're opening it up to S1 and S2s, because up until that point, it's only been S3 onwards that get to pick media in our school. But so my early experiences of teaching film in the class has always been from S3 onwards. So it's right into the national qualifications road. So with that, it's been kind of a baptism of fire, as some might describe that as. But what I like about it as well is it's just basically an excuse to talk about films all day, every day. You know, it's almost like it's like any other subject. If you're passionate about it, hopefully that comes across to your pupils also. And it's great as well because we've just introduced S1 to S2 about 4 years ago. Because there's no really experience and outcomes for specifically for media in the BGE, you're kind of borrowing from other subjects. So of course there's English, there's IT, there's drama, there's art, and encompassing all those skills into your course. So you almost get a limit of free reign of what you want to teach with S1, S2. I don't know if that's anyone else's experience doing that, which I've loved doing that. But at the same time, approaching that, it's like, where do I start? So for me, it's a case of, well, I'm preparing them for National 4, National 5 and higher. So it's almost getting the basics, so they're sort of literate in that language and those skills ready. When it comes to National 4, they got a rough idea, one, of what the subject is to choose it, and two, the skills and knowledge like that goes along with that. So stuff with S1, S2 so far, I give little tasks. Like, for example, one we do is camera shot bingo. Is that they get bingo cards, all the different camera shots, and they look at trailers just so they can identify the language used and be able to. It's almost like evidencing their points they're trying to make while in a discussion. Yeah, and also playing about a narrative and genre as well. So we look at fairy tales, and we take a well-known fairy tale, and they basically discuss how to use different narrative structures to tell that story. So a lot of skills like that, and hopefully so. Like I said, I know it's a kind of difficult question for me because it is from S3 onwards, but it's almost like to go forward, to go back in this case. But yeah, that's pretty much my experience with CFE so far.
No, that's really cool. I like that idea about really like using film to promote literacy, which is just, I think film just such a good hook. Like, I think once you have the kids, then you can pretty much layer up anything on top of that. That's amazing. Louise, what were your earliest experiences of film?
So when I did my PGDE at Murray House in English, we were lucky enough to get a few sessions with someone who came to teach us about using film and media in the classroom. And just straight away from that first exposure to, I've always been a film fan, but to my first exposure to using it in the classroom, it just clicked. I thought, that's brilliant. That's exactly what I want to do. And I used it from the start of my probation year as an English, I know Robert doesn't like this, but an English text for, critical essay purposes. And then gradually over the years, I've been building it into actually using it as film for its own sake by teaching media. But through BGE English, since the very start of the Curriculum for Excellence, I've used it in my classroom for teaching not just film itself, but for teaching other things, using film as inspiration, using film as helping them to develop their literacy skills and reading and writing, talking and listening as well. So I've tried to incorporate it in every aspect of teaching English, in the hope that I can eventually get that embedded into the curriculum as a choice for third year, for example, like Fraser already has, as an expressive art almost. I would like to get that choice in there. But what we currently have, the best I've been able to do with the limits in the timetable is have the whole of second year in my department, all second year pupils do 1 period of media a week. And that's largely based around the study of film. So all of them start off by studying short film, and they use the Screen and Shorts resource for that, which is a tile on Glow for everyone that's not familiar with that. And we use 3 of those to teach the basics of, you know, film education. So we look at camera, music, sound. The Into Film resource, 3 Cs and 3 Ss, is really useful for doing that. And Into Film's resources to help teachers structure the teaching and learning roundabout early learning on that. They're excellent. Can highly recommend you getting into the Into Film website. So there's just so much there. So we use that as well to help inform the learning of these short films. So the ones that we use currently are Father and Daughter, Dangle, and which is just a hilarious wee film. And what's the other one? The new one that's there, Sandman, which is not really suitable for younger primary. If there's anyone here with young kids, it's a wee bit gruesome. But we use those to teach the basic skills, and everyone in second year does that, and it's been really engaging and it's worked really well. And then they go on to all study WALL-E, which is what they're just finishing, and we use that to look at, you know, a theme and characterization, and also all the techniques of film that we want them to learn. So all of second year currently do some media, and what I have at the moment is all of National 5 also study a film for their critical essay option, so they all do Stand By Me. And I have higher media, with the hope that I can get National 5 into the 4th year curriculum. Ours is still separate, 4th year and 5th and 6th year, so we don't currently have it as an option, but that's my ultimate goal. But yeah, I've been using it from the start. I use it every day. I use it in as many different ways as I can think of, and I try to encourage everyone to do the same, because it's a wonderful tool for teaching and learning.
Yeah, it's so underutilised as well, and there's just so many resources out there, and film, GFTs get their resources as well. Yeah, there's so much material available for teachers. It's just having a look and just taking a chance on it, taking an absolute punt on film. Jacqueline, what about yourself?
Well, I'm saying but it's really Michael and I's experience. When we got involved with film in John Paul, it was used more when we first started as a sort of behaviour strategy. When you went up the school, there was the kids that might not access into or Nat 5 English or higher English, and they needed an alternative pathway, but it wasn't necessarily treated as an alternative pathway. It was more, we don't really know much about what media is and what it means to teach film, and there's this sort of stereotype that we're all battling, that it's just watching films. So let's do something with that, and let's see if, like, put these kind of kids together in a class and use it as a sort of means for managing behaviour. But there was that case of it, but the other side of it is it actually really worked. Like, putting all these kids in and starting to look at things like The Dark Knight, and actually at that time they were really interested in studying Titanic, but sort of running with that and going, right, okay, we're all together because we've been told to study film. Now we actually kind of want to, so let's see what we can make out of it. And like Fraser says, there are no easy no's for media. So when you're looking to put any sort of film course together, you've got carte blanche over what you want to do with it, or the means by which you want to go about something. And that's what we kind of did. At first, it was pitched at the lowest ability in any year group, that here's an option for you, maybe you could do media. But it's actually really hard. Like, when you get into teaching media, it's actually quite difficult to take a subject like this. So now it's grown very, very slowly, but that means it's been sustained growth. And we've now got kids from first year right up until higher that are picking it because they really, really want to. Michael and I had a massive focus to try and get kids in to work experience within the film industry, because of the growing industry for film in Glasgow and in Scotland. And it was because of their interest in film in the classroom that kind of led them to do that. And we've had tasters of kids going out into like the BFI Film Academy and the Animation Academy and working with GMAC in town to try and get some sort of something. But it all kind of grew from the fact that it was a behaviour management tool when we first used it for a certain type of kid. And we've kind of built it from there. So now we're able to have it kind of similar to you, Louise, everyone in first year does one period of media a week here. And I've made the course that it focuses on, it rotates around all the key aspects. So they do like the narrative section for 4 or 5 weeks, and then the language section for 4 or 5 weeks in the ground, and do like a sort of taster session of all the key aspects. So when it comes to second year, they've got an actual tangible idea about what a media course is. So it's not just, I'm going to pick the thing on the options that sounds like I'm just going to be watching films all day. And there's no exam in it. There's nothing like that. You just sit and watch stuff, and it's essentially a film club. But it means that this year in second year, there's something like 137 second years have chosen media. So there's 4 classes, and they're absolutely bursting. But they're all really keen, and they all want to do it. So then it came into, how do we build a course for them that keeps them really engaged and gives them samples and tasters about how fun it can be before we move into National 4 and National 5 and higher, when it all gets very written and all very literate. And making sure they then pick it for third year, because then we've got massive third year sets, just to make sure that people are picking media for the right reasons, and they're picking it because they're interested in this thing that all of us are so passionate about. And the way that it's grown in this school is the thing that I think that I'm the most proud of, that where it started and the kind of the kids that were coming in to Michael and I's classroom, to you can manage them and you can get them around by watching film, and how it's grown into the school is I think is amazing. But beyond that, Michael and I used film for things like staff training events, because on a Monday after school, when everyone's really tired in a winter term and you need to stay back for a staff collegiate that nobody really wants to be there in, if we're going to hook kids into learning in English or in science or in maths by using film in the best possible way, we should be doing it with the adults as well. So Michael and I designed a couple of training sessions for our school for CPD events that would have sort of film as a hook, because film is the one thing that everyone has in common. And I think that we worked really hard to embed that into the kids, and it's really starting to make a difference. And we've started to make inroads in that respect within the school. But we've tried to do our best with it, with staff too, to see the kind of impact it could have there. So from where my experience of film started, it's changed massively, because at first it was really extracurricular, like Louise, you mentioned, working with Interfilm, and having the film clubs after school, and that was brilliant, and the opportunities that you can get through that company are absolutely wonderful. But now it's grown to the point that there's like 300 kids taking it in the school, so it's growing arms and legs. That's my experience.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's such an important observation that everybody's touched on, that film is the ultimate IDL. Like, there's just so much in it, and as English teachers, probably by trade, we're so used to just doing a text, but this text is just, its potential is exponential. That's what's really, really cool about film. So we're going to move on to another question. It's, if we're thinking about curriculum for excellence, why do you think film works in C3, and what sort of things have you done in the classroom, and even beyond the classroom? Like, how has your school community really embraced film, in your opinions? Fraser, we'll go with you again to start us off.
No problem. Well, first of all, to answer that question, I find film is probably the most accessible tool for kids overall. Also, I think it allows pupils to almost unlock their potential fully. I know it's a total cheesy line there, but it's so true. I mean, it's automatically, a majority of people here are English teachers or English-based teachers. If you ask kids to read a book or read a novel or anything like that, they immediately switch off. But if you say to a kid they're going to watch a film and study it, then it's a completely different reaction they have to that. And I think that has to, given the modern world as well, we're surrounded by media. You know, I just think you can't keep playing ignorance because of that. You have to make sure the kids have got the tools and the understanding to know what's going on around them as well, especially online. So to go back to what Jacqueline was saying as well about the idea of with the discipline with the film text, I totally get that, because I think what happens now, and I'm trying to shift away from that, is film is seen as used as a treat for kids. It's like, you do well, you watch a film. It's like, whereas we should make the film an integral tool, part of the teaching experience. So going, and like, it's almost like looking back to the previous question for Michael as well, is with S1, S2, is because we work on a rotational basis between drama and media. For half the year they're in media, and the other half the year they're in drama. So same with S2 as well. So what I did was I divided the course into two. In S1, they do almost like the theory side, analytical side of media, obviously given practical tasks to do throughout as well. And S2 is solely practical. So for example, for 16 weeks, they are planning, shooting, and editing their own short movies in groups. And I think what that is as well, it's just unviable skills that you think about. Like, again, because always I help as much as I absolutely can, but for them, it's up to them to plan. It's up to them to secure locations to film. So they have to ask members of staff. And for an S2 to go and do that at almost like a semi-professional capacity, I think that's an undervalued skill for kids to have. You know, sometimes the teachers here, someone comes to your room, they go, "All right, miss." You know, so the fact goes, no, you have to go and negotiate to use their room at a particular time. And it's great to see. It's almost taken on that whole sense of responsibility of going out in the school and planning for props, costumes, rehearsals, all that. And you see the glee in their faces when they do that. It's just absolutely fantastic to see. It really warms your heart. So again, it's almost like I've taken the National 4 onward course and split it into two. And what happens then is, because the kids that are out and about the school, the kids in other classes get to see that, wow, this is very different from other subjects. For a start, they're not stuck behind a desk. The novelty of, we can go out and actually create, but at the same time, you got to toe that line. You got to make sure you got eyes everywhere, because kids being kids, any chance they get, they'll do what they want. But that's what I mean. I just think film is an absolute great tool to use, and I love just seeing kids expressing their thoughts and feelings about watching a film. You get to really feel it, access these emotions. So, for example, using the opening scene of Up, you ask kids, well, what is it that makes you feel sad? And I think kids can almost access their emotions far greater in a film text, media text, than rather reading it in a novel or a poem. And unfortunately, that's just how the world is now. You know, so I think that's a great way. And it's a great discussion piece as well with film, no matter the subject. And I love the idea as well, Michael was talking about, that it's definitely film is the greatest tool to use for IDL. Definitely, because depending on the text you pick, it can stretch out to all different subjects. Like, for example, just now, my S3s are currently doing a documentary film competition. Everyone's like competitions, because kids respond to that is like, yes, I want free sweets, I'm doing this. So yeah, so again, the only thing they were given was school, and the ideas the kids are coming out with in their groups just shows you that maturity and that understanding of media now. So for example, we've got one group who are discussing mental health with teenagers in school. The other group are looking at the impacts of COVID. Some kids are looking at the impact on technology. And again, taking that responsibility that he looked at S2, they're going around negotiating not only locations, but times for interviewing members of staff. On top of that, I mean, can you imagine when you're in S1, S2, S3 going, "Hi, miss, can I interview for my documentary?" I would be terrified of that, you know? So things like that, I really take it for granted. And yeah, just now as well, I always think the seasons always really help depending on what task you do. So for example, you had Halloween there. So of course they're going to learn the conventions of horror and make short horror movies using those conventions. I actually put one of the wee films on the Twitter, on my Twitter page not long ago. Fantastic use of a wee jump scare, fantastic. And then just now as well, my wee S1s as well are looking at Christmas adverts. And again, how Christmas adverts are designed. And so they're looking at conventions of that. What tools does a filmmaker use to try and, in a negative word, manipulate your emotions? All that kind of stuff. So they're really thinking about that. You'd be surprised how many ideas come up with, oh yeah, we're going to find a homeless man and we're going to film. It's like, no, you can't do that. You're not filming a homeless man. But no, so it's stuff like that. I again, with the main thing I'm looking at is the sense of responsibility the kids get, because they plan and they get to create their own product. They have a finished product at the end of it. And I think that's something that was very undervalued.
Amazing, yeah, no, I totally agree. I think if we're thinking about like life skills and preparing kids for contributing and being effective contributors that C4E is really craving, and if we're thinking about the 4 capacities, then film definitely ticks all of those boxes. Louise, what about yourself? Why do you think it works as a text within CFE?
Well, take your pick. I think it just covers so many different things that were, so many priorities. As you said, it is absolutely the ultimate ideal tool for teaching in the classroom. It can be used in every single subject, throughout the primary and secondary curriculum. I think it's a great equaliser. It's so accessible for all students, regardless of their backgrounds. And I've found that children with different challenges to learning, ASN, EAL, for example, that when you do film with them in the classroom, they don't feel quite so frightened of approaching it. And it often brings out really quite sophisticated analysis from young people that you previously would have thought, they don't put pen to paper, or they're not really, getting it, or they're not engaged in their learning. I've never yet in 15 years met a child who wasn't engaged by studying a film in the class. And I think that speaks volumes, because it doesn't matter what else you teach, if you not everybody enjoys the same thing, but most of the children have been engaged with film, certainly. For specifics in the BGE that I've used it for, well, the S2 media course, as I said, we start with short film, and we look at film language, but also in that unit we introduce them to the idea of representation. And then we move on to Christmas adverts, same as you, Fraser. That's because usually we're finishing the short films round about, kind of November sort of time, and because it's one period a week, you don't have a huge amount of time to dedicate to it, so they do Christmas adverts throughout November and December. We look at how the filmmakers can convince you to buy things, convince you to support a certain brand, how they make you feel. The John Lewis advert is obviously, for the last few years, there's been many examples. So we use a couple of the slightly more controversial adverts to pull out issues of, representation. For example, the fact that the boxer, the dog, do you remember the boxer, the dog who was jumping on the trampoline? And that they had a lot of complaints because there was a black family represented in that advert, which shocks the children when you talk to them about that. So it's always a really good way into that sort of discussion. Also we look at the Sainsbury's 2014 advert for the First World War. It's a really good one. I mean, you could spend 3 months studying that advert actually for lots of different reasons, and it links into history and English curriculum too, but it always generates really good discussions about commercialism and using the First World War, and the British Legion were involved in the making of that to sell chocolate bars or to sell Sainsbury's as a brand, and the kind of ethics and morals behind that sort of thing. That works really well. They always get really engaged. It also includes, a game of football, which again is another engaging element for a lot of the young people who previously wouldn't necessarily be that keen to study an advert. They move on to their own short filmmaking after the Christmas holidays. And most of the time we use stop motion for that, just because of space constraints. We've got 10 English teachers and 7 classrooms where things are really tight accommodation wise. Some people have got a lot less room even in their rooms than I do, and we just don't have loads of rooms for people to be, when they're in English, all out doing filmmaking in different bits of the school. So we kind of try to stick with stop motion because it's a wee bit easier to do at a desk. And you can do it, I mean, they can use their own phones. I know some people have got issues with that, but you can use iPads, or you can use another tablet, that sort of thing to make stop motion. You can do it with cut paper, you can do it with plasticine, Play-Doh, Lego, you name it. Use your imagination, you can make a stop motion film, and it always really engages them. They get so involved in the different production roles that are involved, and get quite excited about watching each other's films at the end of it, which is always a really nice thing to do. Excuse me, I'm just looking at my notes. the health and well-being aspect of using film in the classroom is one of the biggest, and I think particularly given what we've all just been through with the pandemic, that, you know, going on 2 years now, they've had such disrupted learning, and lots of different mental health issues have really been exacerbated for our young people. We're seeing a lot of anxiety, a lot of children still not really keen to return to school and normal learning. And because film is so accessible, I think it works really well as a tool for working on health and well-being, you know, PSE lessons, but again, across the curriculum. And Into Film's got specific resources on mindfulness through film, which are really good. They work really well. Other than that, I would say that the cultural awareness that can be taught from using film in your classroom, it can't really be, I mean, I can't really think of another way that you can achieve such wide cultural awareness with using another format in the classroom. As English teachers, all of us trained as English teachers in the panel, we love books, obviously, we love reading, we love written text. It's not that those things shouldn't still be taught or celebrated, but using film is just, it is actually really sophisticated. As Jacqueline said, it's actually a really difficult subject, studying media. Analysing film isn't simple at all. And trying to introduce it as early on in the curriculum as possible, I think is really beneficial. I would really love to have what you've got, where you've got it from the start. It's to do with staffing, which I'm sure a lot of people can identify with. A lot of my colleagues now are on board with using film, and everyone in the department is teaching media to second years, and a lot of them are using it in the senior phase too. But it would be great if everyone could be using it and then take the pressure off me, so I could hopefully roll it out to more year groups. But yeah, I think I've covered everything I wanted to say.
Amazing. Yeah, I think film is good for kind of having the kind of tough conversations about making kids more culturally aware, you know, and tackling tough topics for them to kind of acknowledge, like kind of white privilege and things like that. I think it is such a great conversation starter, and I think it's just such an important inroad. Jacqueline, what about yourself?
I think that everything that could be said about why film works as a text for in the realms of CFE has already been said. I think that it's so accessible. You stole my party line about how it satisfies all the 4 capacities within CFE, so I won't dwell on that too much. So I think that everything that could be said there really has been said. I don't have huge experience in delivering film as a film and television text for senior phase, because I am trained as an English teacher. I don't want to not teach books where I can, if that makes sense. Like I don't always want to study film within English. So the fact that we've got so much media means that you can have free range there to try and put in sort of passion projects and things that you're really interested in. Things that we're doing right now with film in the school. For first year, there's 2 different types of film. Everyone so far has talked about how film is the perfect means for delivering an IDL. And we have that in our school from Harry Potter. We have a double period every Thursday where the whole of first year and lots of practical subjects within the school. So me within media, there's an English teacher that does it as well, that does journalism and newspaper writing. The technical department do set building, art do claymation and the animals from the Harry Potter universe. Techie look at set building. Home economics do the costuming, and they make Harry Potter badges and ties and hats and like things like that. Science look at the spells, and it's a double period every week where first year can just kind of relax and enjoy something. In the first 2 weeks in August, the whole of first year, watch Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, because I'm sure they've seen it before, but it's just also quite nice to everyone be doing the same thing for a bit and chilling out, and let's enjoy this film that has not aged brilliantly, but let's take what we can from it. So first year get to travel around all these different departments in the school. And it started off when Michael and I designed it as a sort of, let's look at all the skills within the film industry that you knew nothing about. And then because of other departments that are wanting to get involved, like music, look at scoring, and there was chat at one point of PE getting involved and running a game of Quidditch. That they just get to do different cool activities that are themed around the Harry Potter universe, which is brilliant. But then also within the English department, we have first year every day of the week for one period, and one period of that, like Louise, you say, is handed over to studying media. And I designed the course for that to kind of give each of the English teachers to become sort of subject experts in one of the key aspects of media, to sort of take the pressure off of me to deliver it all, but so that they've got a bit of understanding about what it takes to go into this completely different thing that is not just an alternative pathway for English, it's an entirely different subject, and they get to see a little bit of it, and then they rotate around all the English classes as well. So we've got narrative has been studied using Into the Spider-Verse, language has been studied using the Hunger Games, institutions, which is always really hard. They're looking at Lego Batman and looking at DC as an institution. Audience is using Dunkirk and looking at all the audiences that feed into films like that. And there's really one for every key aspect. We've got 8 first year classes, so each one of them throughout the whole year will get to do something. And then in my head, I envision something like you said, Fraser, but I do think it's really ambitious to get them to do a practical filmmaking project where they take all the things that they've learned about all the different key aspects and everything it takes to go into making a film and influencing a film and putting that into practice. I would absolutely love that to happen. We'll come back to this at Easter time and whether it's actually going to go ahead for the summer term, but I would love that to happen. Second year, this is, we're still really early in planning how we were going to deliver it once children have opted this on their options forms. So they get it 2 periods a week in second year. So we looked at the National 5 course and we thought, what's the hardest bit? And then we'll start from there to try and make it as straightforward and stripped down as possible. And then we'll build from there and we'll provide challenge and we'll provide extensions and we'll sort of go from there. So the thing that I personally find the most difficult about delivering media is the concept of institutions, because I do think that when they're studying a film in English, they can get their head around characterization and theme. So narrative's not that much of a stretch and film language isn't that much of a stretch. And the way that things are represented, they can get their head around. When it comes to institution, it's like you've jumped from anything that they knew before in English to starting to study business and like the administration of things. And you're looking at like the socioeconomic influences that go into something like that. And I think they find that really hard. I find that really hard, never mind them. So we chose to base the whole of the second year course around Disney and look at different Disney texts for every key aspect that sort of satisfies what we need it to. So for narrative, we looked at the Jungle Book, and for language, we looked at the live action Aladdin versus the animated Aladdin and looked at how film language has changed between these 2 types of films. We're going to look at, we've got plans to look at Disney Plus and Disney social media, The Mandalorian and how Lucasfilms has influenced the Disney Corporation and Pixar, Brave for representation, because we all love the way that we come across in Brave. And that's kind of how we've planned the second year course. Third year right now, like Fraser mentioned, we're looking at horror, but we're trying to look at different types of horror. So we've taught them the conventions that you see in the likes of Dracula, Frankenstein, the Phantom of the Opera. But the text they're actually looking at is A Quiet Place, and they are making little short horror films, but we'd like them to subvert the expectations of the genre and the conventions of the genre in the way that A Quiet Place does at the beginning of the film and the sort of first act, kind of the first 2 acts, and put that into practice, so that they're looking at things a wee bit differently and just that they're thinking a bit more critically about what they're seeing. They're not just becoming absorbed and consumed by the mass media of things. They're really starting to pick things apart and look at how things work and exactly why they work like that. And I really think that sort of loops back and answers the start of the question, is how do films work for curriculum for excellence? Like, they work in more ways than you can actually put into words. And I think that the more teachers engage with resources like the Film Education Journal, Film Education Scotland into film, the more teachers that get on board and try things like this, you'd be amazed at the outcomes that you can get from kids in classrooms. You'd be amazed at how invested they really can be with visual art. And I think it's amazing, and I think it's so entertaining for me just to see what people come up with that I would never have imagined something like that. Yeah, I'm going to post some of the short horror films that the third years are making on my Twitter that have been really funny. Don't know if that was the intention, but they've been really funny. And I think that's me. I'm just checking to see if there's anything else that I've missed. I think that's me.
Okay, cool. So we're going to just take questions if anybody has any questions. So there's one in the chat, and it's asking about film as a resource. So they're a student and they're doing film education studies. Can you think of any particular films that would work well and where you would use them? So if I'm thinking about, if I was going to do something to do with maths, I might do The Imitation Game, or I might do something with The Martian or A Beautiful Mind or something like that as the kind of film as the anchor to hold the learning in place. Can you guys think of where you would use particular films to maybe even address like social issues that you were going to tackle in the classroom?
Well, Hidden Figures is a really, just kind of popped into my head. It's really great for issues of representation, and also curricular wise, you know, maths, computing, etc. Because I think sometimes maths and science teachers struggle a wee bit with the notion that, you know, they can engage with it, but there's so much out there as a really good, you know, window into a world where people are applying the things that they're learning at school. But yeah, it's really good for teaching representation. And every time I've shown that film in class, the young people have been really shocked by the experiences of these women. Firstly, because they're women, and secondly, because they're Black women. It really is an astounding film, and it works really well in a classroom.
Amazing. Yeah, totally agree. Anybody else got any suggestions?
For me, usually I think kids prefer like love Marvel films, don't they? So like Black Panther is always a very good one as well, given the, again, because it deals with the societal context as well. Because again, that's a big part of kids who are studying media as they go on. One of the key aspects to look at is society. That kind of helps me determine which film I'm going to choose that year. Because I think if you've got a good, strong societal context behind the film, then if you talk about that first, then show the film, they can tend to identify those significant factors here. So that, for example, Black Panther, they obviously, when you look at previous Marvel films, all their heroes on the big posters and the advertising campaigns have been majority white. So when you see a film like Black Panther and you think, they feel and they know how much of a breakthrough that film truly is. So yeah, for me, and in terms of covering other subjects, I think like anything, like most teachers will always find a way to make films fit into different subjects. I mean, even if it may be clutching at straws sometimes, but your chances are you will find someone to make it fit. But for me, like for younger ones, definitely, I think Marvel is the way to go down to immediately grab their attention and obviously engage in learning.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Marvel's just such a good hook for the kids. It's got such a range of films if we're thinking of interest in feminism and stuff like that. Like we've definitely got these role models for especially the younger children. So no, I absolutely love the Marvel. I think it's a great window into these discussions. Jacqueline, what about you? Have you used any texts?
Yeah, I think that again, what you guys have said, that I think a great place to start is to think about what are things that the kids know nothing about. It's amazing what kids have just got no experience of, because they live in their place in Glasgow here, and they don't really go out of the confines of their bit. So it's amazing what they don't know. I'm using Spike Lee's Black Klansman right now for my 4th year classes. And we're just sort of in the middle of looking at the real life ramifications of this, because Black Klansman's a story that's set in the 70s in America, in Colorado, and that's so far away, and that couldn't possibly impact us in any way in 2021. But then if anyone has seen the film, it cuts to the end, and it shows footage from 2017 of the Charlottesville riots. And the film itself is dedicated to someone that died that day at a Black Lives Matter rally in Charlottesville. And it shows footage from Trump, someone who's a very prolific figure in the media, that our children should be taught how to engage with. Like, they need to be shown the things that you should say and the things that you should be feeling, and like sort of guided through that when you see things like this. And they really enjoyed the film. They were shocked by the language. They found it really entertaining. But as a comedy, like Black Klansman is billed as a comedy. they found it uncomfortable to laugh. They just weren't sure whether that was appropriate for them to react in that way, because I know that you're kind of making a joke here, but I don't think I'm allowed to find this funny, which then led to really interesting discussions. But when we got to the end of the film and we got to see the footage at the end, everyone was completely silent. Like no one breathed in the room when you saw the actual footage, because no one knew what to say. And then that just led to like a period-long discussion about, do we see this now, and in what ways in our society do we see things like this now, and maybe not necessarily like to do with race, but then other types of injustices and social inequalities. What behaviours do we see that we really should be tackling and doing things about? And there's so much of that going on in the world now. So there's endless amounts of films that maybe give kids, but not even kids, adults, they give people a vehicle to start a conversation. And I think that can only be a good thing. And if film is the thing that does that, then let's lean into that. Someone mentioned earlier in the chat that how health and wellbeing outcomes can be really tricky to sort of get into the curriculum and find ways to speak to kids on their level about things that they're feeling and things that they're thinking. And a film that I've found really big success in that I use for this in the lower school for English is Pixar's Inside Out, because it's a film about about emotions. It's a film about growing up and dealing with emotions. And while you could tentatively take a film like Cinderella and Harry Potter and then make links about how that's really about Harry growing up and about Katniss and Hunger Games growing up, Pixar literally laid it out and went, no, this is actually what is happening inside our heads. We've drawn it. Now let's start a conversation about mental health and taking care of ourselves. And that can lead to brilliant discussions about that with children. And I think that that's wonderful. And the more films that there are to do that, the better. They've been given so many shout outs in this discussion, but Interfilm's website, where you look at their resources, if you get into the resource section, you can filter it by subject for things that you're looking at. So if you're looking to find a film to apply to science or social or languages or RMPS, if you go into the Interfilm website, it's all filtered by colour as well, that you can see the tags that apply to the different subjects and the different curricular areas. There's a wealth of things for you to just sort of dive in and get involved with and see what you can make. And the more you try and work with the kids and see what they're into, the more ideas you'll have to make something for yourself and think of the benefits of that. Like, that would be amazing.
Awesome, yeah. I think film, it does just get that discussion going regardless of the topic, because whether you like a film or you hate it, it's fulfilled its purpose. Do you know what I mean? Because it's getting you talking about it and kind of teaching kids how to justify their opinions. Okay, we have another question. There is an assumption that young people won't engage with older films, e.g. from the 40s or the 60s, etc., or foreign language films. Have you ever tried studying these with any of your classes? And if so, what's been their reaction? If I think about myself, I did it with a boys' class. I had a wee group of boys and we were looking at fight sequences. So that was just my hook to get them interested. And then I could kind of do, once you have kids, you can kind of lay up knowledge and you can do your thing. So we looked at stuff, like we clips from like John Wick and Bourne, and then we went on to Brotherhood of the Wolf, which is a French film, and because they don't understand that cinema is made anywhere apart from the UK and America. So that got us talking about stuff like that. And they were like, really? And you're like, yeah, go on to IMDb, like, we love it. And then I dropped in a favourite of mine, the fight sequence from The Quiet Man with John Wayne. And it just worked so well. They were like, were they fighting in films back then? And again, it just got the conversation going. And yeah, so that's my experience of being able to get them in. I think once you get that hook for what they're into, then you can just open it right up. Fraser, what about yourself? Have you had any experiences with getting the kids into older or foreign?
Well, I'll go with foreign films first. The first one I've taught so far is Pan's Labyrinth, the Spanish film made by Guillermo del Toro. First of all, it's just a beautifully made film, but also as well, immediately when you speak to the kids about it being essentially it's a fairy tale. It's a modern day version of a fairy tale, but as long as you tell them as well, it was actually a horror film at the same time with the backdrop to the Spanish Civil War. It definitely piques their interest. And one scene for me that the reaction, they first of all, they absolutely adored it when they watched it. The one reaction is the scene with the pale man. I think we should the iconic monster with the eyes and the hands and so on. They are absolutely horrified from that particular scene. But yeah, and again, it's like my advice is obviously I would use from now on is the Bong Joon-ho's quote is like if you get below the 2-inch wall of subtitles, it opens up a whole new world of films. You know, so I'll always love that quote. But again, I just think it proves as well to them that films, as you say, Michael, are not only made in the US and the UK, but are very universal and deal with very universal themes. And as well as, again, the stereotypically, the females in my class, they enjoyed the fantasy element of that, of Ophelia going on this quest and trying to prove her to be a princess. And the males enjoyed the war aspect, how the brutal nature of the Spanish Civil War. So yeah, I found that a very engaging text. But to answer the next question about the older films, I haven't necessarily taught any older films, but my absolutely dream text to teach would be the 1957 film, The Incredible Shrinking Man. Because for me, that film is the one film that got me into films in the first place. I remember watching it, and I had the big telly in the corner with the big, massive rear end. We all remember them before flat screens. And I think seeing Grant Williams fight the giant spider with a big giant pin, I just wondered how the films like that get made. How did that happen? How did they make the giant cat, the spider? Incredible. And I love the idea as well of the IDL aspect behind it, because yes, it's the 50s. So you've got the socio-political element to it all. You've got the technology behind it, all the nuclear elements to it. You've got English, you've got history behind it all. The science element, for me, that would be a dream to teach a film like that. And I think a lot of texts I've been lucky enough to teach because I try to make my enthusiasm as infectious as I can while talking about it, to the point that it's almost like you wear the kids down, to be honest with you. So I'm hoping one day I know it doesn't answer the question, but that's a film I would love to teach. So there you go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, just grind them down with enthusiasm. Louise, what about yourself?
I can totally identify with that. Everyone laughs at me because I always say to them, I must be the only teacher in the school that will be saying to you, go and watch more go watch more films, please. You should be watching more stuff. I've also taught Pan's Labyrinth, and it just goes down so well. It's an amazing film. I love it. And I think that comes across. When you just love something, it definitely informs your teaching, and they can see that, and it helps. You don't have to love it to be able to teach it, but it does definitely make a big difference. In terms of foreign language stuff recently, my higher media class have been very engaged with Squid Game. Now, I haven't taught it, but we have done a lot of chatting because of the controversy about people choosing to watch it, not using the subtitles, but using the dubbing and all the stuff that goes, the issues along with that. And they've been really engaged with that. And the majority of them had watched it with the subtitles, but there's one or two who find that incredible, like that's too, like they can't access it that way, so they needed to watch it with the dubbing. So yeah, we had discussions about that, and that was brilliant. And it's really nice that they are engaging with something that's not in their own language. I think that's brilliant, regardless of what it is. And I think it's opened up to them, because it's been such a cultural phenomenon. It's opened up to them the world of subtitled films. And I think that is a good way in to maybe teaching more foreign language titles in the classroom. In terms of older things, I've always taught Psycho, the original Hitchcock. I've also done The Birds, looking at genre stuff as well. And it's always amazing when they huff and sigh and roll their eyes and you see that it's black and white. And you say to them, Hitchcock chose to make this black and white. He could have made it in colour. And they're like, oh, for goodness sake, you do get the huffing and puffing, but without fail, I've never met a young person who did not then become really ensconced in it and entranced, and they kind of forget it's in black and white, and they're just, engaged with the film and the action, and they can't believe that, sorry for the spoiler, but they kill off the main character so early on in the film. Everyone's seen Psycho, surely. Sorry. So yeah, that always goes down well. Even if they don't initially want to do it, they do really enjoy it. And it has, there's an awful lot of stuff you can teach about filmmaking from looking at the work of Hitchcock. So it's gone down quite well, but I haven't done too much else in terms of the older films. I think a lot, as with anything, you kind of go with what you yourself are most familiar with. I'm a child of the 80s, so do a lot of 80s things. And new stuff too, but yeah.
Nice. Yeah, the kids laughing at the bit where the birds attack the school kids always gets me. Like, they think it's hilarious, and I remember it just shocked me as a child. Like, absolutely shocked me. Jacqueline, what about yourself? What are your experiences of older films and foreign?
I've used a bit of older films, or sort of clips of them when we've been looking at horror this year. We looked at Nosferatu, which is the 22, I think. We used that. We looked at the original Phantom of the Opera. We looked at bits of the original Dracula, and we looked at, there's a really good Mark Gatiss documentary actually that's on BBC that's in 3 parts. It's about the history of horror filmmaking, and it was that I watched first. It was on BBC 3 or BBC 4, and he looked at where horror came from and where it started, which is in the 20s. Well, it's in the 1800s really, and we started from there, building bits of the clips to lead up to looking at A Quiet Place. I don't have a lot of experience in using older films because Michael and I, we tried years ago to put in things like even Back to the Future, not old, but the kids just were disillusioned by, oh, that looks rubbish, and the effects look so crap, and they just would then they would switch off. So we thought, no, that's not going to work. Tried Jaws, we set it up, Jaws, it was the scariest film of its time and you've never seen anything like it. And they were like, is that it? Like, that's not even scary. So there's been a bit of a struggle with the older films, but foreign language films and television is actually, to link to something that Fraser said, this would be my absolute dream thing to teach. And it's not a film, it's a TV show, and Michael's going to roll his eyes because all I do is talk about it. I would love to teach Money Heist, the Netflix series. I think that it is outstanding telly. I think Parasite, bar the bit on the couch with a couple, would be brilliant to teach for a senior class. I think that as a foreign language film would be brilliant, and I think that what that has done to the film industry has been monumental, and I think that it will change the scope of what Best Picture means at the Oscars now. I think that would be amazing. But I think that we've just, thinking of the year that we've just come out of, and kids have been sitting at home for 2 years on Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, Now TV, just consuming stuff. I wish that we had more facilities to use these platforms in schools and tapping into the likes of Squid Games and things that they're enthused with. Because I am so enthused by Money Heist, and the last part of it's coming out in December, and I can't wait for it. All I do is think about it. And I would love to teach that. I think that would be amazing. And in my head, we're going to do like a heist in the hall, and we're going to get Spanish down, and they're going to become like the guards. And like I could, in my head, it's amazing, but it's never also going to work. I would love to teach Money Heist, and use more of those streaming platforms in schools, because then you've got more chance of kids going home and going, oh, well, I've got Netflix. Maybe I shouldn't just look at what's the top 10 trending things in the UK today. Maybe I should scroll down and look at some of the other categories and what are other things that I could watch and get involved in, and something I might not have chosen for myself before. And myself in the National 5 class, I've got a big argument now, because I've made them all go home and watch Money Heist over whether you should watch it subtitles or dubbed. And there's kids that I just don't talk to because they watch it dubbed, and they're just not my friends in class anymore. So yeah, that's what I would like to do. I would absolutely love to teach Parasite and Money Heist.
Good choices. Right, so we're nearly running out of time, but there's one more question. So it's about whether when we are teaching, we're using film in the classroom, do we focus on context, story, film language? Would you guys always start with context? And then where would you go once you have the context? Because we're all kind of got a unique way of doing it. So Fraser, where would you go after you've set the context for any given text? So for example, Pan's Labyrinth, where would you go with that once you give them the context?
Oh, Pans, in fact, I changed the text for this one actually. So, okay, for example, we did The Invisible Man a couple of years back, and basically what I started doing was talking about the hashtag Me Too movement. We looked at Black Lives Matter and so on. So that was a big thing, a big factor at the time when the film was made. So we talked about that first, and obviously talked about the history of how films affected by the society of the time. So, for example, we look at Invasion of the Body Snatchers and the fear of communism all the way through. So, so it's hard not to be influenced by what's happening around you. So, again, after talking about that, then watching the film Invisible Man, the idea of gaslighting was there to see on the screen. They understood. It's like this is an extreme version of gaslighting this victim. But it's because, again, how can you convince someone that someone's not there if no one can see them? Do you mean? So it's almost like the very definition of gaslighting. And a lot of that comes from the Me Too movement as well. The strong female character dealing with past abuse and trying to come to terms with trying to be a survivor. And talk about it as well, I'll link it with the conventions of horror at the same time. So the idea of the final girl and the Me Too movement just coincide together so well. As the final girl almost feels like it was made to be part of the Me Too movement, if you think about it. So that's why these two go. I love the idea of teaching society first, because with genre films, science fiction, horror, they're always societal. No matter what they say, there's always a social element to it, which I think is great to incorporate. So I'll always go societal context first, and then they view the film entirely different, the way that you would want them to view the film.
Amazing. Louise, what about yourself? Like, where do you go after you, like, what's your process of teaching?
It depends on the text is my answer, which is maybe not the most helpful answer for everyone. I apologise. I'm teaching the Dark Knight to my higher media class just now, for example. And I mean, it hits all of the key aspects. You could teach everything about media through using this film. So I usually start with, a societal context. We also spend a lot of time, actually it works quite well for institutions because of the whole IMAX innovation and all the stuff that goes along with that. And then I feel like it's important to place it in a context in terms of the genre as part of and how it moved forward, that genre of filmmaking. And then we start analysing the film, so looking at the language, the narrative, the structure of it. So in that, I suppose as an English teacher, I would always start with context. And most of the time with a film, I would start with that. But again, it depends on the film, what I feel like needs to be, understood first before approaching the film itself. So it depends on the text is probably my answer.
Awesome. Jack, what about you? Do you have a different process?
No, I sort of agree with both. And then I'm going to throw a third in that I don't always start with context, because that might be the thing that I want them to look around for themselves. I looked at Billy Elliot a couple of years ago with third year media, and it was a largely boys class who wasn't going to watch it because it's a film about a wee boy dancing. And had I given them the context about Margaret Thatcher in the mines in the 80s and about male identity and male representation and what that meant, I think me giving them the context at the beginning would have changed their experience and their journey through the film, that went, in simple terms, from them hating it to really liking it. So I totally agree, it depends on the text, but I agree to the point that I might not always start with context because it depends on what I'm trying to achieve with it. So it's a tricky one. It's sort of, my National 5 class get really annoyed with me because we're looking at Skyfall right now. Well, we've looked at it for most of the key aspects for National 5, and they get really annoyed with me because I look too much into the context, and they say, but you're just looking for things now. Like, you've given us this context about society and the British Empire and people in power and in control. And I know, miss, you really think that Aston Martin represents this, but it's actually just a car. So it kind of depends. Like, I know that you think his Barbour jacket has significance, but so it's not a brilliant answer, I'm really sorry, but it just depends on what the angle I'm going for, but also what I want them to think of. There's a boy in particular in my 4th year class that just, oh, he hates me. Like, it just hates me. Because like, you ruin films. Why can't somebody just wear a hat? I'm like, they never just wear a hat.
Amazing, amazing. Right, so just to wrap up then, Fraser gave us his film that he would love to teach but hasn't yet. Louise, what film would you love to teach that you haven't yet?
So my favourite film of all time is Blues Brothers, and for lots of reasons, and some of them are kind of sentimental. So I don't know if it would be the greatest choice. I really don't. And also, I'm a massive fan of musicals. It's one of my favourite, genres. I don't know how great it would be for teaching, but I would love to approach the teaching of it and see what I could do with it. Because whilst it is over the top, ridiculous, pretty daft, there's an awful lot in it. Again, even though it's like a vehicle to show off, John Belushi's talents and Dan Aykroyd, and it's got all these amazing star kind of turns in it. It does also have a message at the heart of it. They're on a mission from God, and I think there's an awful lot you could do with it. But again, I don't know if it would be the best choice because maybe I'm clouded by the fact that I love it so much.
Jack, what about yourself? What would you love to teach but you haven't yet?
Oh, what was I said? A Money Heist.
Okay, so you're still Money Heist.
I'd like to teach Money Heist, but you've taught it, and I'm raging that you've taught it. I'd love to teach Paddington.
And taught it well, I might add.
Oh, I would. I'd love to teach Paddington, particularly Paddington 2, and I think I can. I don't think I can get Money Heist in, but I can see Paddington as being possible. Money Heist is like a pipe dream that I would love to fit in some way. So I'm going to sneak and go 2 answers.
Okay, so that's our challenge then. By the next time we all get together, we have to have tried to teach our favourite films.
I'm going to come
Right,
in.
thank you. Right, so that's us finished. Thank you very much for listening. I'll bounce it back to Robert now.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Michael, for such a fantastic discussion, well hosted, great questions from the audience as well, and really inspiring, hopefully, for many of the people in the room. Well, thanks very much for your time. Keep in touch with us via Twitter. Flip will send out reminders for our next symposium, which will be in spring, and then we have our conference in June as well. Once more, thanks very much, Michael. I hope you all enjoy your weekend. Stay safe out there. It's pretty windy where I am anyway. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye.
Guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.